Hi, it's Wacky Tacky Day, so I'm looking a little different in this video. We're going to be talking about ordering positive rational numbers. What is a rational number? A rational number is any number that can be placed into written as a fraction. For example, 4/5 is a fraction. 10 can be written as a fraction by putting it over 1. We know that the square root of 25 is 5, and 5 can be written over 1. And we know that the decimal of 0.7 or 7/10 can be written as 7/10. So these can all be written as fractions, so therefore they're rational numbers. A very important concept to think about, because we're going to be talking about comparing them and ordering them, is when you're comparing rational numbers, you can use a number line. And we will be doing this some in another video, but you can use a number line if that helps you. Another one is when you're dealing with only fractions, you always need to make sure that you use common denominators, and then you can order them according to their numerator from least to greatest. And when you're dealing with fractions and decimals, always make sure that you convert everything into a decimal, which means you're going to be working with some long division. All right, we're going to use the greater than, less than, and equal to sign here. Remember what I said when we were talking about when you're looking at fractions, you have to have a common denominator. And I happen to know that the least common multiple between 8 and 6 happens to be 24. Okay? So we're going to just rename the equivalent fraction according to the common denominator of 24. I know that 8 goes into 24 3 times, and 3 times 7 is 21. I know that 6 goes into 24 4 times, and 4 times 5 is 20. So I know that my equivalent fractions, that 21 is greater than 20. Therefore, I'm going to put the greater sign in the space here between the two original fractions. Here I've got 3/5 and 18/30. Well, I can already tell you I can either reduce this down, but I know that 5 will go into 30. So let's just keep 30 as our common denominator. And we're going to put 30 over here. And we already have a 30 over here with 18 as its numerator. So we're going to keep this fraction as it is. We're going to change and find the equivalent fraction of 3/5 by saying 5 goes into 30. 6 times 3 we know is 18. Well, if I've got 18/30 here and I have 18/30 there, that means these two fractions are going to be equal. Had I reduced this fraction down to its lowest terms, we would have gotten 3/5. Here I've got a decimal and I've got a fraction. And I said in the very important concepts that anytime we're working with a 2, we always want to change our fractions into decimals. 3/4 is a very common number that we work with, and some of you might already know the decimal equivalent for it, but we're going to go ahead and just come over here and say 3 divided by 4, and say 3 divided by 4, and remember we talked about this is your in number, this is your out number when we're talking about lining it up and putting it into division symbol signs. I know that 4 doesn't go into 3, so I have to add a decimal, bring my decimal up, and add a 0. 4 goes into 30 7 times. So 7 times 4 is 28. When I say 30 minus 28, I know that's 2. I still have some stuff left over, so I need to keep adding zeros and bringing it down until it either begins to repeat or it terminates or stops. So 4 goes into 20 5 times. So 5 times 20, I know, is 20. So I know that the decimal equivalence for 3/4 is 0.75. And when I look at this, I'm going to look at, I know that I have nothing in the ones column here. They're both going to be 0. I can always place the 0 there. I'm now going to look into the tenths column, and which one is the least of the two? 6 is less than 7, so therefore I know this is going to have a less than sign, and I'm going to keep 3/4 there because that's what I was comparing it to. All right, I want you to try these two. Go ahead and just pause the video and then come back and we'll work on these together. Okay, we did say anytime we're working with fractions and decimals to change it to a decimal. So I'm going to take 1 and divide into it 5. I know that it does 5 does not go into 1, so I'm going to bring up my decimal, add a 0, and I do know that 5 is going to go into 10 exactly 2 times. So when I'm looking at these two, I know that this is going to be 0.2. for this 1/5, okay? So 1/5 is going to be 0.2. So if I look at the tenths columns, I know that 1 is less than 2, so I know that this number 1/5 is going to be greater than, because we read it from left to right, 1/5 is greater than 1800ths. Here I've got another one, just like we do up at number 4, I've got 1/9. So I've got to change this into a decimal by saying 1 divided by 9. And I know 9 doesn't go into 1, so I have to put a decimal and add a 0. 9 goes into 10 one time. 1 times 9 is 9. When I subtract 9 from 10, I have 1 left over, and I'm going to bring the 0 down. And as you can see, this is going to continue in the same pattern. It's going to start to repeat. So I can add zeros all day long, but it's still going to repeat. So I know this is going to keep going and going and going. Okay, now this is a 0.1. This is what we call a terminating decimal because it stops at the tenths column. So if I wanted to compare these two, I could put a 0 here because we know that just holds a place value, and we can just keep on with the 1s if you want to. I know that these zeros, I could add zeros here, and that will hold my place value. And I know that 1s are going to equal each other, but I know that 0 is less than 1. So I know that this is going to be less than the 1/9, because the 1/9 is going to be 1/10, and that's going to be in the tenths column 1/10, and it's going to keep repeating. So I know that this is going to be greater than 0.1 or 1/10. You can always stack those decimals and compare their place value digits. Here I'm going to be looking at fractions. How are we going to order those from least to greatest? We're going to look at and make sure they all have common denominators. We're very lucky at this first one because we know that they all have a common denominator at 1. So all we have to do is look at the numerator and just go from least to greatest. 1/9 is going to be my least number. My next number will be 2/9, and my highest number is going to be 7/9. Okay? And we're always going to write down the original numbers that have been given to us. Here I've got two numbers that have a denominator of 3 and one that has a denominator of 4. And you should know by now that 12 is going to be my common denominator for all of this. So let's go ahead and write 12s down, okay? And then we're going to find their equivalent fraction as 12s. 3 goes into 12 4 times. 4 times 1 is 4. We know that 4 goes into 12 3 times. 3 times 1 is 3. 3 goes into 12 4 times. 4 times 2 is 8. Okay, now that I have common denominators of 12, I can look at which one of these is my least, is the smallest number in my numerators, and it's going to be 3/12. Well, 3/12 is what we have for 1/4. So we're going to come back at the top, write the 1/4 down, then we're going to come back, we've already got that, the next number is going to be 4/12, or what is 1/3 in our original state, and then we've got 8/12, which is going to be 2/3. So this is how we would write those down. Make sure you always go back to the original. So you want to line these equivalent fractions up so you can do the best at comparing them. All right, let's look at these three. If you want to at this point, you can pause the video and come back, and I'll be making sure that you know what you're doing by making sure that we have the same thing. So go ahead and pause it, work these out, and just bring it back on and we'll work on them. Okay, I know from 5, 2, and 10 that 10 is going to be my common denominator. 5 goes into 10, 2 times 2 is 4. 2 goes into 10, 5 times 1 is 5. So when I come back over here, I'm going to make it so that 1/10 is going to be my first, and I'm going to keep it 1/10 because this is what it was in the original amount. 4/10 is my next, so that's going to be 2/5. So I'm going to write down 2/5. And then I know that 1/2 is going to be my next because that was equal to 5/10. So this is going to be 1/2. This is an announcement in school.
Players and soccer players to call their parents today to arrange class, to arrange
All right, I know that I've got decimals, 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 and one that has a fraction. Well, I can look at this and tell that I've got a 4 in the ones column, a 4 in the ones column, a 4 in the ones column, but here I have a 0. So I automatically know that this is going to be my lowest number. So I'm going to go ahead and just write that over here and put 0.4, and we can stop thinking about that one. Now I've got decimals here, but I need to change this 1/8 to a decimal. So I'm going to read it as 1 divided by 8. So it's going to be 1 divided by 8. I know that 8 will not go into 1, so I'm going to bring up my decimal and I'm going to add a 0. 8 goes into 10 one time. 1 times 8 is 8. 10 minus 8 is 2. Add a 0, bring it down. I know that 8 will go into 20 2 times. 2 times 8 is 16. And continue working this, okay? Just don't stop because you're just tired or you think, oh, 2 decimal places is enough. Add the 0 because now you're going to see that 8 goes into 40 5 times. So when 8 goes into 45 times, that is going to go exactly 40, so that I have nothing left over. So this 1.8 is going to be 4 point, and I've got 1, 2, 5. Okay, so now I know they're all in the 4s, but now all I have to do is look at the tenths column. Let's look at the tenths column. 0 is going to be lower than 1, so I'm going to start out with, I've got 4.0, and I'm going to come over here and rewrite this. I'm going to put it up here, 0 and 4, 0, 4 tenths. I know that 4.8 is going to be my next number, 4.8 hundredths. I know that the next one is going to be 4.125, which is going to be 4 1/8 because we're going to use the original that we started with. And then I know that 4/6 is going to be the greatest one of all of them. So I'm going to write them in their original form, and this is from least to greatest. Here I've got decimal, decimal, fraction, decimal, fraction. Well, I can look in the ones column here, and I can tell you that I've got 2 in the 2, I've got a 0 and a 0, and I have a 3. So I know this is going to be my largest. So I'm going to come over here and just write 3 1/5 because this one's actually going to be the largest number. I don't even have to divide that out with the decimal and work it out because I know by the 3 in the whole number spot that it's going to be the greatest. The only other fraction I have is going to be 2 3/4. And remember, we said 3/4 was a very popular fraction, and we worked it out where 4 goes into 3. We know it doesn't, but when we add a 0, it goes in there 7 times 28. We did this just a few minutes ago. Add a 0, bring it down, and I know that 4 goes into 25 times, so that's going to be 20 with nothing left over. Okay, so I know that this is going to be 2 75 hundredths. So the only thing I've got to do now is go back to the 0, go to the 0 here, look at the tenths column. I know that 0 is going to be less than this 2. So I'm going to come over here and say my lowest number has got to actually be this 0.021 thousandths. And I'm going to erase this and put this 3 1/5 way over here on the side. Okay. Then we've done these two. This one is going to be my next largest number, which is 0.283. And then I know that this 2.01, because I'm going to go to my 2 as my whole numbers, is going to be the next one, 2.01. And my next number is going to be 2 3/4, because I want to do the original number that we started with is 2 3/4. So when I go and order these, I'm going to have it ordered just like that. If you see that you've got a whole number that you can go ahead and tell 3 is the largest whole number, it's the only one with a 3, go ahead and write it down as its largest. If you see you've got a 0 with no whole number, but you can compare the tenths column and you can tell which one is the smallest, go ahead and write it down. Don't sit here and try to get everything just right before you do it. If you can see certain things, go ahead and pinpoint it, write it down, and then you can compare them and write them in descending or ascending order, or from least to greatest, greatest to least. All right? Got some homework for you and some classwork tomorrow on this, and I will see you tomorrow.